do you have that movie that you have watched once and said, I could never do this again? I was hoping that you would give a movie just because so that I can watch it and be like, is this like, how am I on a scale of 1 to Sydney? How much can I take?
Hello. Do you want to play a game?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
I see dead people.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Here's Johnny.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Welcome to Talking Horror with Jamie and Nikisha.
Hiya, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Nikisha, and this is Talking Horror with Jamie.
And Nikisha.
Where we share our love for spooky things and talk horror through the lens of human behavior. Welcome, everyone. So many lenses, so little time. So exciting.
Some nice frames I'm seeing.
Some nice
here.
frames here. If you're looking at us on the YouTubes, we all got frames here because we're ready to dive deep. Today, we are talking about the 2008 French psychological horror film, Martyrs. And now this film was directed and written by one Pascal Loger. And at the risk of totally butchering everyone's name that stars in this, I am going to refrain. But let me tell you, these performances by these beautiful women are quite gorgeous. And I would love to have known their thought process in going through this movie because it is a doozy. But before we get into all of that, special announcement. We have a special guest with us again, one Sydney. Hello, how are you?
Hello, I'm so good. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited
We are so
to be back.
Yes, we're so happy to have you back here. Listeners, if this is your first time hearing Sydney, seeing Sydney, go back to our episode. What was it? The Devil? I saw the Devil.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
How could you forget that trauma?
Yeah, I will never forget.
No. Oh, we saw him all right.
Many incarnations of the devil. The thing is that of course I don't forget the images. It's just so many, like, I saw the devil, devil's here, evil dies tonight, like whatever the case may be. Like it's there all in the brain just spinning. But believe me, the images are still ever present, and Sydney has graced us with yet another movie that will be burned in the intercrevices of my brain. But
also, you're welcome.
Yeah.
But we're so happy to have you here to talk to us about this movie. But also, Sydney, please tell us where people can find you. I hear you have a new podcast. Like, tell us everything.
I do. Yeah, so you can check me out on TikTok. That's where I started here, Horror Chronicles. And I did just start a new podcast in the last couple months or so. It's called the Hello Sydney Podcast, obviously, because
Brilliant.
I love
Truly
Scream
perfect.
and I'm Sydney. So
Yes.
yeah, so I actually, one of my earlier episodes was about Martyrs because that is my probably top 5 favorite horror movies of all time. And that's a big deal.
Oh, wow. Okay.
It's a very big deal.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Also talking about top 5, Sydney, I just have to say that your top horror movies of 2023 TikTok just made my list feel so validated because as a connoisseur of horror and so knowledgeable you are, it was really nice to get your take on, especially some of the movies that were kind of overhyped in a sense. So it was just really nice that you're like, listen, y'all, I like Saw. And I'm like, oh, yes, that's why I love Sydney.
Number
It's
one.
like,
Yep, number one. No
Saw
shame.
is fantastic. Right. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. And make sure you guys follow her on TikTok. Again, Horror Chronicles, we'll plug that again. But we're here to talk about Martyrs. And so heavy spoilers for this. 2008, you can watch it on Tubi with ads. And you will need those ads as a break from everything that's happening. But I am really excited to discuss this. But Jamie, please give us all the trigger warnings.
I don't know. It's all of them.
Everything.
Like, can I just say any and all triggers? I mean, there's child abuse, there's adult abuse, just like torture of all varieties.
Yes.
There is murder of adults and children. There is self-harm, suicide, creepy secret societies, the mentions of the afterlife, also flaying alive. Can't forget
Whew.
that.
This movie has everything.
I will
Like-
say the only thing
Everything.
that this movie does not have is sexual assault, and that's actually what makes it not classified as a
man.
new French extremity. That's the only
So-
thing that stops it.
Ooh.
I know we're not
This-
there yet, but that's my first like of this movie.
Yes.
Mhm. That's so interesting. I never even thought about that because you are kind of oversaturated with everything else. But at the end of the day, I am very happy that there is not any kind of sexual trauma in
Yeah.
in this movie.
Yeah.
Great. Yes. Well, as Jamie said, there is everything. The flaying, especially. I went to the Museum of Torture in Chicago, and they have like a kind of statue, or different kind of things, like saying different torture things, and like flaying was one of them. And it's super,
I would go to a
super
flaying
intense.
exhibit.
Oh.
Just to see different kinds,
Yeah.
all the things.
New experiences.
Yes. All right. Well, before we get into it, well, first off, have you guys watched anything new? Is there anything that you guys are loving as far as horror? Any new 2024 horror movies that you have seen? I know we're still in January, but anything of the sort?
I'm trying
I
to
watched
think if
this
there's
movie
really
the
been
other
any
day
other
called
new stuff.
Suitable. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just saying,
Go
like, I couldn't think of if there's any other like new things. I know there's like big new things coming in February, so I've kind of been like racking my brain to like figure out what to watch. But what have you watched?
I watched this movie the other day called Suitable Flesh. It's on Shudder.
Oh, and yeah. How was it?
Yes. I actually really liked it. It has one of our like horror icons, Barbara Crampton, in it,
Cool.
and Heather Graham's also in it, and it's actually like it's kind of unique. I don't know. I liked it. I liked like how they executed it. It was different. It was like more shocking than I expected it to be. It was pretty good.
I saw it on a lot of top 10 lists last year, and I'm so happy that it's like available to the public. I'm really excited to watch that. I'm happy you enjoyed it. That makes me more excited to watch it.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. Well, add it to the list of things.
It won't
especially
traumatize
just
you
trying
as
to get
badly
in.
as this one did.
There you go. We love that.
Yeah, before we get started, as a reminder, you can follow us at Talk Horror Pod on all the social medias. We're on YouTube. Hi, YouTube.
Hey.
You can find us on all social medias, as I mentioned. But we're also movies that we don't cover here. We cover on social media. So check it out there. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter. And then if you're looking for more horror chronicles, or you're looking for the Hello Sydney podcast, it's all in the description of this episode. So you can find all of it there. We want to send you to all of those things. So check them out. I've listened to the Hello Sydney podcast. It's a blast. Whether you've seen the movie or you haven't seen the movie, like I hadn't seen Oculus in a long time. So just listening to you break it down, but also infuse your own kind of opinions and thoughts, both on Mike Flanagan, how the movie progresses, all of that stuff. Like I just found it really super enjoyable, the way that you present it, the way that you pace the podcast. So, and then there are other episodes too where Sydney talks through like the history of like the in movie history of the Saw chronologically, all of that stuff. So definitely check out the podcast. It's really good. So thank you so much for sharing with everyone and your love for horror.
Thank you. So kind.
Yes, fantastic. Well, with that, Sydney, we need a plot summary of Martyrs from you.
This is including
So-
spoilers, right? Like we want to
Yes.
go.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
all in.
What's the plot?
Heavy spoilers for it. You have 2 minutes to give us the entire plot of Martyrs, and Jamie will time you.
Yes, I will. So 2 minutes on the clock. I'll give you when you have a minute left, 30 seconds left, and then I'll count you down at 10 seconds. But you're
Let's
gonna
do
you're
it.
gonna go. You're gonna do great. I believe in
It's
you.
gonna be
think I got this.
fantastic.
You're gonna kill it.
Hey.
She's gonna flay it.
Oh, God.
Too soon. Never again.
Never again.
All right. 2 minutes is on the clock. Ready, set, go.
All right, we got these two girls. We got Lucy and we got Anna, and they're besties, okay? And they met in an orphanage because Lucy escaped this like traumatic situation as a kid. And she ends up seeing this like woman that's attacking her, and it's really fucking terrifying. And she's like at the foot of her bed, but whatever. Then next thing you know, it cuts to 15 years later. And Lucy shows up at this house, and it's just this like all American family. Well, they're not American, they're French. All French family eating breakfast. And Lucy comes in and just absolutely kills them all in cold blood. And they're all violently, brutally murdered. And Anna shows up and is like, "What'd you do?" And Lucy's like, "These are the people that like abused me as a kid." And Anna doesn't believe her, but helps her hide the bodies anyway. And then Lucy is like attacked by this figure, but then we see it through Anna's eyes, and we see that she's not actually attacked by this figure. This figure is actually a manifestation of her grief, because when she escaped this place where she was being abused, she left a woman behind, and now she's realizing that killing this family out of revenge didn't solve her trauma, and she kills herself. So then Anna's like, "Oh my God, she killed herself. What do I do?" But then she hears something, and she goes downstairs to realize that this family actually was evil, and they are holding women captive in their basement. And it's now too late because she didn't believe Lucy, and Lucy is now dead. But now it's also too late for Anna, because all of a sudden these people show up, and they take Anna down to the basement, and they're like, "You're actually going to be our next person, because we basically do this thing where we torture people alive until they become martyrs and see the afterlife, so that they can tell us like what they see." And they then proceed to brutally torture Anna over a span of what feels like 3 hours of movie, including flaying her alive. And she literally has no skin, but it works. And she sees something, and she tells the mademoiselle, and then the mademoiselle shoots herself before she tells anybody. So it was all for nothing. The end.
And that's the plot.
Yeah,
That was fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow.
With time
Yeah.
to spare. Excellent
It's
job.
probably the most controversial Pixar movie.
Yeah, I would
Yeah.
definitely agree. Strange.
Wow. Yeah, no, that is exactly it. And so listeners, feel free if you want to just skip this one and just listen to our thoughts. We'll give you everything that you need to know about this.
Or just
And
take it moment by moment. You can pause, you can take a break, you can revisit, like take it at your own pace.
And it's so funny because as we were getting ready to record this podcast, like right before I started watching Martyrs, I had a friend text me who is also into horror. And so he'll let me know the movies that he's watched. And he literally texted me, "Hey, have you seen Martyrs?" And I never told him that we were doing this for the podcast. So it was really fun to be like, "Oh my gosh, I'm about to watch it right now." And we can share in our trauma now that we both have watched this. But I'm very excited to discuss this. So let's get into our first segment of likes and gripes.
And now our likes and gripes.
So, Sydney, since this is the movie that you chose to discuss for as a guest on this podcast, please go forth and share with us why you chose this movie and your first encounters with this movie, and give us your likes and gripes.
So I first heard about this movie. So back in the day, like pre-TikTok, pre all that, there was Tumblr. And I was a Tumblr kid, a Tumblr teenager back in the day. And I had a horror movie Tumblr. And I had like 30,000 followers, which, when you're like 16 on the internet, that's like a big deal. And everybody told me about Martyrs.
Yes.
Everybody's like, "You need to watch Martyrs. Like, this is the one." And I watched that movie, and I've never felt more numb in my life after watching a movie. But I just thought it was like the most, mind you, this is like 16-year-old me watching Martyrs. So that's perfect. So I think Martyrs is just the most like beautiful cinematic masterpiece that there is. It's never been like, because people put this on their list of most disturbing movies and whatnot, and it's never been, it's definitely disturbing, but it's never been like unwatchable to me. It's always just been such a like an incredible unfolding of a story. It's just, I don't know. I could watch this movie every day, which I know probably sounds insane to some people.
Wow. Yeah. It's great though.
I hate to say it, like, I like everything about the movie. I really can't pinpoint one thing that I don't like. Like, I think it's just such a beautiful telling of like trauma and how revenge doesn't get rid of that trauma, and now how your friend who didn't believe you this whole time is now paying for your revenge that you needed to get for your own trauma. And I think the only thing I don't like, actually, because this is my Roman Empire, is that we never figure out what Anna saw.
Oh, for sure.
That, like,
yes.
keeps me up at night. Like,
yeah.
and it almost I think it makes it more effective that we don't know.
Sure.
But I just need to know. I need to
Well,
know.
on a here's another question for you, Sydney. In your scale of what is not watchable again, like, do you have that movie that you have watched once and said, I could never do this again?
Not to sound like an absolute psychopath, but like not really. Like, there are some movies that I wouldn't watch again because I just like don't want to.
Yeah.
Like a Serbian film, like, gross. Don't ever want to watch that again. But if like I was to do something like this and somebody's like, hey, we're going to do a podcast episode about this, would I watch it? Yes.
Sure.
Yeah.
But like, I don't want to. Whereas like Martyrs, I would like willingly watch every day.
Sure.
Yeah. That's just so interesting. I was hoping that you would give a movie just because so that I can watch it and be like, is this like, how am I on a scale of 1 to Sydney? How much can I take in my horror movie genre? No, it's okay. You're still giving us like great things to just kind of consider in our, I guess, quest of introducing different horror movies and different things about mental health and human behavior, and this one fits the bill for sure. And we'll really get into it in our next section. Is as far as films, and sorry I'm like asking all these questions, but like I want to get a deeper understanding of like your love for this movie. But as far as like foreign films,
because it's baffling to Nikisha.
Understandable.
Well, I mean, I'll get into my likes and gripes after I asked Sydney this question, because there were some things that I could appreciate about this movie. But I guess, do you feel like there is a certain type of horror movie that draws you more? And is it this type of psychological, but also body horror, if you will, but also, it's a foreign film and it seems like they just don't give a fuck. And so they just throw everything out there.
Yeah, and that's, I think, why I'm so drawn to foreign films, because like, as difficult as they can be to watch, they're just so ruthless. Like, you never know what's going to happen, and I like, for me, that just sticks with me more.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't mean the ones that are just like the straight up torture porn again, like a
Sure.
Serbian film, like gross, but things like this, and like I Saw the Devil, and like a lot of like different Asian horror films, like A Tale of Two Sisters, like those just really stick with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I will say, Sydney, you did, and I'll get into some of my likes and gripes of this. One point that you made was about how the film was shot, and you just thought it was like beautiful all around. And I will say there were a lot of shots that I did enjoy in this. One of them being when they were flashing in and out of them like moving the bodies. I thought that was like just like a cool shot. I also thought some of the sound design was really nice too. One in particular was after the gunshot at the very end with Mademoiselle, and then it goes to the credits and it's silent. So like the gunshot is the last thing that you have audibly heard, and now you're watching this footage, the credits, but also the footage of these two girls, younger versions of themselves. And I think it just added so much to the creepiness of it, of like, you're not hearing anything and you're sitting with your thoughts and you're sitting with what you just saw, and it just really kind of like lingers with you for a long time, because you're just, I don't know, expecting something else to happen, but nothing else is happening, and you're just kind of watching what was, knowing that this film is done. So I thought that was a really kind of beautiful choice in that sense.
I agree with you, Nikisha. The cinematography in this movie is spectacular, and
Yes.
and the pacing of this
Ooh,
movie
ooh.
is truly incredible. It takes breaks when it needs to. It ramps up when it needs to, and I think that's not only a part of kind of how the narrative unfolds, but how the camera is presenting the narrative to you from what point of view. And I just think that like this movie could be a slog in somebody else's hands, and it was in the remake, but
The remake, yeah.
yeah, but this one is just like so well paced, and very little horror movies have this like sharpness of pace to it. I mean, I think that I Saw the Devil has a very similar pace to it as it unfolds, because a movie like these two could be very repetitive, and they're not in any sense of the word.
Yeah, I'm so
Especially,
glad
like,
you
the
brought that
scene-
up.
The
No, go
scene
ahead,
of
Sydney.
like,
Yeah.
sorry, Anna's torture. Like that
Yeah.
scene again, like it feels like it goes on for so long, and it's just like the way it's done, it really makes you understand how they're truly just dehumanizing her. Like there's
Yeah.
no words spoken. Like and you see her just like slowly getting weaker and like slowly like starting to lose it more and more. So like what they're doing is working, and just the way that specific sequence is paced, I think like it's incredible.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
this movie is an hour and 49 minutes, and it feels like 3 hours in the best way. Like 3 hours in that like so much happens. They pack so much into under 2 hours, and that is wild, but it never feels like 3 hours. It feels very, very streamlined in a beautiful narrative sense.
Yeah, I totally agree. Like literally one of my one of my comments was that there's so much that has happened and it's only 45 minutes into the movie. And it's kind of both folds. And I did want to ask the room about debating on if you like a movie that is like nonstop action, like from the beginning, or if you need kind of a build up. And I think what you were talking about too, Brian and Sydney, about just like the American versions of horror versus foreign versions of horror. And I feel like a lot of the foreign movies that I have seen, which haven't been much, but the ones that I have seen, the pace is so fast and so much is happening. And then I think more in the American horror, like there's a lot of exposition, there's a lot of buildup, and like little things are happening. And then you get to the big thing at the end. Because just reading the plot summary of this movie, it just says two sisters, friends, whatever, go on like a revenge spree to help with find the abuser of one of the girls. And so in my mind, I was thinking the whole movie would be them trying to find the people who abused her, and then everything happens. But it literally, in the first 45 minutes, they found them, they killed them, and now the main character is dead. And where are we going now? Which it makes the movie more interesting. And even though I know what you mean, Brian, about it feeling like 3 hours, like it didn't even feel like 3 hours to me. It literally just felt like 45 minutes of nonstop. What is happening? Because you think it's one thing and then it's something else completely different. And so it keeps you on edge, because where you thought it was going, and so you wait for where it's going to, it dismisses that immediately. And so then you're like, what's happening?
And I think it's also contextual, because like an American horror movie versus like we'll just say French or European or foreign horror movie to us, it's all about kind of the filmmaker, because quite frankly, like you're seeing this through a more avant-garde kind of perspective, even though it is like a brutal horror movie, versus like studio interference in Hollywood, because they want the certain, like, this is the plot point, then you build to this, and then we only have the budget for this scene at the end, so you have to make the Nun 2 pop in that last, in the last third, but like we're just going to build up to it. Whereas I feel like every I'll say not every, because I do not have the breadth of knowledge of foreign horror, but like all of the famous ones that you're supposed to watch, whether like have a very, it feels very pure and, no pun intended, raw, like, because like this is from the heart and the soul of the filmmaker, versus like the stuff that we get. Like the studio stuff that we get is all like touched and and rated to death and whatnot. But then you get like these like fun ones that like bubble up, and then all this like a Talk to Me, or like a something that like feels different because it's kind of untouched. They made the movie and then somebody bought it to distribute it, versus the studio is like, hey, let's make another Conjuring universe movie, but like it has to follow these rules and this structure because we know that audiences will pay for that.
Yeah, that's so true. And I think that it wields a different kind of like horror movie fan when you can have like all those aspects coming in at once and not be, I think it's a great point of it not being touched by Hollywood, and not feeling like, oh, I guess in a sense, and maybe I'm just making this up in my brain, but I'll say it anyway, like the prudeness of like America.
Yeah.
And so it's like things have to be a certain way, and you can only have so much put in. And because Americans can only handle so much. Like if it's too much, then we're all going off the rails.
The perfect example of that is Takashi Miike, who's the guy who did Audition.
Yeah,
you guys have seen that. He's a Japanese horror director. He did like Itchy the Killer. He's done some like really like more disturbing Japanese horror, and they asked him to do a segment for Masters of Horror, which is an American show. And they really reached out to this man thinking that he would make something that could be aired on American television. And needless to say, it was shelved before it was even shown. And it's called Imprint, and it's probably the most disturbing piece of cinema I've ever watched in my life.
Okay, well, there you go. We have a movie, guys. Imprint.
But that's the perfect
Figure
example.
out.
Like Americans just can't handle that.
Yeah. But I do love the point, the term torture porn was brought up, and it made me think about Terrifier and how I would watch Martyrs again over watching Terrifier, because it in a sense of like Terrifier was such torture porn to me, of like, we are just abusing women with no cause. And I think also that just kind of taps a little bit into just the reality of like how the world is anyway. So it's like, why do I want to watch that? At least with Martyrs, they're giving you some type of reasoning why the things are happening, and not necessarily, and I'm not justifying anything. I'm just saying this is my justification for being able to watch it again over a Terrifier, is, there's an actual story there, as opposed to just a man abusing a woman just because he woke up on a Tuesday and said, this is what I'm going to do today, if that makes sense. Overall, of course, the makeup in this was fantastic. Like, to see her flailed and just skin, I just thought that the practical like makeup and all that was super great. And I can't even imagine what that process was of trying to get all that together. But yeah, it's definitely a movie that if I don't have to watch it again, I won't. But I understand the beauty of it. And I will just say, this is my last thing. It was very, very hard to watch her being physically beat up by that man every day. And like, to Brian's point, that felt like it lasted for a long time. It's like, when are they going to let up on this woman? Like, we fucking get it.
Yeah.
Like, let's move on to another thing. But yes, overall, it is something that I'm glad I experienced and we can talk about. But yeah, I will leave this in a pile for maybe not another time. Jamie, Brian, do you want to go your likes and gripes?
Sure. I actually did like a lot of this movie. I feel like this movie was also like 100 different movies in one movie, and I liked most of the different genres of movie that we got. Like, I liked the like the two protagonists coming together and like setting off for revenge. I liked then when we lost one of the protagonists and the other one like discovers that her friend was actually right, and then is like processing both the guilt of like betraying her friend, but also like the trauma of discovering this like new person who's going through something awful. I think that the part that I found the hardest, aside from obviously like the torture, was the rationalization for the torture. And I like was processing this after with Brian for like 30 minutes because I know at the end of the movie
we like a full dissertation
we
conversation
like,
on
I was like, okay,
Yes.
I'm looking up the dictionary definition for martyrdom. Like I have some problems with this. So but I know that they're taking like the Greek definition of like witness, and that's kind of their justification. I think I just had a problem because like that's not really what the contemporary definition of martyrs is. And so like that was my biggest frustration with that part when they introduced the Mademoiselle and like her whole spiel about like the martyrdom, because like for me, at least my understanding of a martyr is like somebody whose like belief is unwavering and they are like persevering through this like torture, whatever they have to endure, but like not willing to give up their belief system. And so like that I was really stuck on like that's my understanding of the belief of martyrdom, and like not really feeling like it was Anna at the end, right? That had to go through the torture, that like she didn't really have any belief about anything in particular. I don't think she believed what Mademoiselle was telling her. It's also curious about just like, you know, we get this whole explanation about how long this secret society has existed for and how many times they've done this, and that they've kind of had 3 successes, but not really, because once those the 3 that have gotten to that point, they've been nonverbal, so they've never actually gotten any helpful information out of them. So it's like, what is so special about Anna that like she is able to communicate that? And like, I don't know, I was just going back and forth, and I couldn't really like, I've been processing this for the last like 3 days and haven't really come to any strong conclusions. But like that aside, I am surprised at how much I actually really did enjoy this movie. And again, I think it's because I found the first and second part really good. Obviously, I can do without the torture, but the end part also really got me when Mademoiselle does get the information and then keeps it to herself and tells all those old white people to fuck off. And like that for me was so, it was actually very satisfying. Like that was the most sad. Like, I don't think I could have sat through all of the torture if then the old rich white people got what they wanted.
For sure.
Yeah. And so like
totally,
it felt like a win, and I was like, okay, I feel not great, but I don't feel as bad because like they're fucked. And like it was just really that gave me some level of satisfaction at the end. And I was like, okay, like so it's really just the justification and the torture part that kind of lost me, but then it kind of brought me back at the end. So again, like there was a lot. I really enjoyed most of the parts of the movie. I agree that like the representation of trauma, and not just that, but like this is a really good representation of survivor's guilt. With the physical manifestation of like Lucy seeing this like demon creature who's just like constantly after her, and like she feels like she has to not just find them for herself, but like find them to like stop this creature from chasing after her. So it's like partially for her, but it's like it's really about the survivor's guilt. It's just really fascinating because even after it's done, again, it's not the satisfying conclusion that she's hoping for. She still continues to be haunted by this person that she left. And it's also so sad because it's like she's a child. Like it makes me think about other movies. Actually, I'm going to write another one down I'm thinking about suggestions. Other movies where like children are carrying this burden into adulthood that just like continues to play out in awful ways, and they like just, you know, whether they're in therapy or not, just continue to have that impacting them, is so real and so sad. And like, yeah, I haven't really seen a lot of media representations of survivor's guilt done so intensely and effectively, especially when somebody like goes as far as Lucy does. So that like really I thought was just like very well done. And then also like I just think like, man, Anna, she really had a hard she did not have it nice.
She really had a hard time.
Went through it.
Yeah.
If only her sister had magical ice powers.
Exactly.
Oh my God. But like, she does so much as a child to protect Lucy after like and it's so interesting too, because like in the beginning of the movie when they're both at the orphanage, like the police or like whoever the authority figures are coming and like talking to Anna like almost on behalf of Lucy, saying like, we gotta find these people, we gotta get them, and Anna's like, yeah, like she agrees, but it's like, why are you putting this child in this like position? But like she does so much for her friend to then have this like for her entire life to have this moment of doubt. It's brief. It's pretty brief. And then her friend commits suicide. And then to find out that after all of that, like the the reality was fact, like it was true. Like for her to then also probably start dealing with a great amount of survivor's guilt as well. It's like, oh my God, like it just like keeps passing on to the next person. It's so fucked. But
and then
it's just,
and then the introduction of the like potential crush or sexuality of the two of them, which is never fully like explored in the best way possible, in terms of like it's just a layer of the movie, it's not the movie. This movie has so many layers that are not the movie, that like it's all these little pieces that make it up, and like that also added a lot to the effect the movie had on me when it comes to Anna dealing with like the grief and the regret and all of that in that moment.
It's also like that very like like the intensity of female friendships, and like that line between like friendship and something more. And I'm like, it was just really interesting because again, like they just had to rely on each other, or like Lucy's had to rely on Anna for so long, and so it's like all just really enmeshed and intertwined. So like for that moment to happen and then kind of like reset a little bit was just really interesting. Of like, it's just clear that this relationship is like fucked up, but like they've just had to be there for each other for their entire life. They only have each other, so like it's gonna be a little bit fucked up. No, that's a really good point. My only other gripe is that whatever that little ball thing on the bedside table at the very beginning of the movie when they were going to sleep in the orphanage was, I would fucking hate that. If I was at a sleepover with someone and that little thing was cling-clanging back and forth, oh my God, I'm such a light sleeper. I was like, why would they put this awful contraption in a bedroom? I hate it. That was literally the first note that I made.
That's amazing.
Yeah. The only other note that I made was at the end, and I think me and Brian said it out loud at the same time, was of course it's all old white people. Because
that's literally
always
on my in my bullet pointed likes list. That's the only thing in all caps.
Yeah. I mean, those are the people that usually fall for cults, so
totally.
Like they get scammed left and right. They fall into cults. I mean,
my God.
Not surprising.
No. I agree. Yes.
Yeah.
I was literally looking at that like, get out? What are we doing here? What's happening?
Jordan Peele would love this.
Oh yeah, for real.
But yeah, I think with more time, I've actually enjoyed this movie more than I thought when I first watched it. Like now that I've processed it a little bit more.
Yeah.
So you're winning me over, Sydney. Time.
I knew this would be the one to do it.
Brian?
So before I give my likes and gripes, I do have a question for the group. In terms of what Anna whispers to Mademoiselle, do you think that it was something like extraordinary that she wanted to keep for herself, so and she just like didn't care, like it was just like so wonderful and great that she wanted it, or was it nothing and she didn't want to have to like make something up and face the group? Do you think it was more of a selfish amazing reason or selfish like reason? I know it does. I know the point is it doesn't matter, but like I'm just curious.
Oh, it does matter because I think about this at least like twice a week. I go back and forth on this. I swear to God, I'll like wake up at 3 a.m. Oh, I swear to God, I literally will wake up at 3 a.m. and I'll be like, shit, no, I think it was something bad. Like I don't. I go back and forth because I think it was either something really good where she literally could not wait to get there, so she took herself out, and I think she's just a selfish bitch and didn't care to tell everybody, or like maybe Anna said like there's only like limited room or like limited time and you have to get there now, like I don't know, or it was something so bad that she couldn't face her followers and tell them that like this whole thing we've been doing is for nothing and we've been like torturing people for nothing, so I'm just going to take myself out and go that way. But then like why would she do that if she knew she was going to nothing or to something bad? So I kind of lead towards it was something good.
So, secondary question to that for you, Sydney. Do you think that Anna was I know the point is that her eyes did glaze over and like we're assuming that she did see something. But is there a world in which Anna is like there enough to lie to her?
I think that would be the biggest fuck you. Like completely lying about it, but I don't think like in that state she would even be able to think about doing that. But like I've also seen a theory that like whatever she saw may be so beyond human understanding that she told the madam that there's something, but I don't get it.
Sure. Okay.
So like maybe the madam was going to like see if she could figure it out herself.
Sure. What about you two?
My first thought was on the side of it's nothing, and so this was all pointless. And because there's nothing, there's like nothing to be afraid of. So it's just like, and to Sydney's point of like, what am I going to tell these people? So because it's nothing, because all this work was for nothing, like, and that was what we were so engrossed in, like that was our whole livelihood. That is just like, okay, I'm just gonna take myself out. So my first instinct was that it was nothing.
Interesting that was your gut. That's so fascinating.
Yeah.
What about you, Jamie?
So I thought that it had to be meaningful, but I also like as I was doing my post movie watching processing, I was doing some like deep dives and looking at articles and stuff just about like what people think about this movie. And one interesting thing that someone said was like, again, the idea of like, if it's something incredible and amazing and she were to share that information with the group, then it puts less like emphasis on the idea of like living your life. Like what would the world do with this information if the afterlife is like so desirable and amazing? Like what there would be no point anymore. So it's like, you know, to kind of keep that from humanity and society, like that is a reason why she doesn't reveal it. But like I think again that only reinforces that like it's definitely something great and desirable that like people would want.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I side on it was something so amazing that she couldn't wait or didn't want to share it. It just reflects the selfish nature of that character in general.
Yeah.
And that group. But for my likes, I always avoided this movie on purpose. I actively avoided this movie because I had no interest in seeing another rape revenge movie. I just didn't. And I was wrong because literally one of the first lines in this movie was she was not raped. There was no sexual assault. And that lifted such a weight off of my shoulders to enjoy this movie. That one line changed my entire watch experience. You never had to wonder if that was like this like weird subtext of the movie. You never had to wonder any of that. It was explicitly stated and you could just move on with kind of like enjoying this movie from more of a PTSD it's still like kidnapping and awful. I'm not
Mhm.
pretending that like, oh yeah, great, awesome, Ratatouille. But like I'm just like that really did something for me. And then this movie just narratively was just so much fun, of like a pure labyrinth of like fun. I felt full after this movie, like a meal in which like I feel so specifically 2023. After watching a lot of horror movies last year, I felt very like not satiated by a lot of them. They had a lot of amazing moments, some really interesting characters, but at the end of the day, when I walked out of the theater, or when I, closed Netflix or whatever it is, or Shudder, I didn't feel full. I felt truly full after this one, and it's lasted me a couple of days. And I know that's like a weird analogy, but like I really this movie had everything. Gore, we made fun of it earlier, but like gore, psychological horror, PTSD, monsters, cults, revenge, religion, scary kids. Like all it was missing was like, a weird house on a bayou somewhere. Like this was like so good from that perspective. And this is a fantastic ending of a movie. Like truly, truly great. I some of the things I really also loved about this movie were I just didn't expect the monster at the beginning, like the PTSD monster. And like at that point, I totally understood that this was, I was waiting for that moment when like Anna didn't see her, but like, that we got. But I just thought it was so well done that it didn't matter, because it's either there or not. Like there's no in between in terms of these movies. So I'm happy the way that they did it.
That's one of my favorite shots of the whole movie is like when Anna sees her and you see her like grabbing her own head. Well, Anna sees her like grabbing her own head, but like in Lucy's perspective, it's the woman doing it. Like, I think that shot, the back and forth, is just the best shot of the movie.
I totally agree. And a lesser director would have like centered it and then like cut in between the two. But this whole movie really is from Anna's point of view. And they make that very clear at the beginning when she is the focus of like the detective's questioning. I thought that you really felt the power of the shotgun in that sequence 15 years later. Like you really felt the reverberations through the victims and even in Lucy's hands. Like it felt awkward in the best way possible in her hands. The shaking the bodies was like fantastic. I love a good point of view of the victim sequence. Like the second that they appeared, I'm like, oh, I know what's happening, and I love this. Like I please show me the victims like first and give me like a little slice of life and then get rid of them. I love that. I was very engaged in the mystery of this movie and the friendship of the two, like really genuinely. I mentioned, and speaking of the shots, Sydney, that you mentioned before, my favorite was stitching up Lucy. The close-ups and then those quick shots of like it going through, kind of like this like weird foreshadowing that Anna is like sewing her up, but Anna's gonna lose all of her stuff later on. Like it's this like interesting like juxtaposition of what's actually going to happen to her. I thought that was great.
Like having skin versus not having skin.
Oh yes, the big swinging pendulum of skin. I thought the kiss was perfect. Like turning her away. There's this like servant attitude of Anna, and like it's like they didn't have parents, and like they're all the family they have. But whether the feeling is like actual love or whether it's like romantic love, they don't really know how to express it. And like I just thought that was such an amazing moment to underscore a lot of what this movie is trying to do and say. And the servant attitude I mentioned is her sewing her, is her cleaning the dead bodies for her. Like they're like helping her when they're little kids. Like I thought all of that was just like really well done. This movie never phones anything in from like this is how horror movies work, but also it works really hard to never explain anything to the audience outside of the Mademoiselle scene. But like that's, you kind of need that exposition there. This is random, but in the fight scene in the bathroom, for some reason, Tubi decided to give you a rating reminder during that scene. So like she's fighting the monster in the bathroom, and at the top it's like rated R for nudity and like violence. And I'm like,
Oh
yeah,
my God.
I fucking know, Tubi. Like,
We're experiencing it now.
yeah,
It happened like multiple times.
it did. It happened multiple
And I
times.
was like, again, I'm aware that
I get
this
it.
is rated
She
R.
has no skin, Tubi.
That's so funny.
And the gore of
God.
this movie is a part of the story, and it represents the pain. And it's not this. I would argue that this is not torture porn. 0%.
I agree.
Like,
Right.
I think that, like, you know, if you want, you know, I have another suggestion, but that I like that she always uses the blade on her golem. She actually goes out of the way to find like a razor or a knife. She doesn't pull the shotgun on the golem. She uses the razor because she's using it on herself. I thought that was just like a small detail that is perfect and brilliant. I loved the two different halves in this concept. I love a good twist, whether it's like Psycho, when you think you know the main character and you don't, you know, this has a very Hitchcockian feel to it in some ways. I love the acoustic background music when she accepts her fate, essentially. I like really enjoyed that. Of course, it's old white people. And I just thought this was really great. These are some of my nitpicky gripes. I like this movie. I'm just saying that before I like get into my nitpicks about this thing. I thought the tone of the opening with kind of like that found footage vibe of like showing it makes no sense narratively. Like, you're going to show this little girl like a weird documentary of something that like happened a week ago to like get her when she wasn't even there. That just felt very like exposition-y for me, but tonally I think it set up the movie really interestingly, especially with the bookend of them as kids during the credits. So like it worked as a tone, but narratively I was like, this doesn't make any sense. I also don't know how the police operate in France, so like I'm not one to like really comment on that.
That's true.
I thought that the Anna and her mother phone call was super interesting from a like, Anna does have somebody, whether or not they're disconnected. But like it also it just took me out for a second because she was in an orphanage, and I know you don't need to have dead parents to be in an orphanage, but like I that was just a little bit, and I'm maybe there was something cut. I don't know. Sydney, do you know if that was like a part of the original script or like I don't know?
No, because I thought the same thing too, because obviously like from that conversation you can tell their relationship is strained.
Right.
So like is it strained because that was her like bio mom who like maybe gave her up or something, or like was that her adoptive mom? Like I don't think we ever figured that out. I've never seen anything about that.
I love I wrote, what do they do? Hang up their favorite tortures on the wall? Like, what is this decor?
Oh yeah.
But then they explained it and I was like, this is amazing. I never thought I'd get a wallpaper explanation. Like, this is fantastic. So that was a gripe that turned into a like. To me, this movie became less scary once Mademoiselle gives her speech. Once you justify this, even though I think I keep saying narratively, but like plot wise, like that makes this movie more interesting, and that's why I'm thinking about it more because of that. But I actually think the scare level of the movie was turned down for me after that point when I knew why this was happening. So that's like a half gripe because the movie is better for it, like 100% better for it. So here's my question about them. I also had a very similar experience with Jamie in terms of like the definition of martyr. I do think that the ending where they flash the Greek explanation of it, which almost felt like a twist in some ways, that it wasn't like your Joan of Arc martyr, but it was more of just like a witness martyr. Like that was really interesting to me. However, the infection of like the inflection of pain just for survival versus like standing up to something and like moving forward is where like my brain, like Jamie said, short-circuited a little bit. But then I thought, does telling Anna why allow her to be a martyr? Because religion is never discussed up until that point. And it's not really even discussed because, in their examples span the gamut. Their examples are religion. And then there's the car accident. And then there's the, like you go through all these like different contexts of almost dying. So is Anna persisting her choice to stay alive, like, and her strength, her being a martyr. I don't know. That's something that I'm still mulling in my head. But that definitely is something I'm thinking about.
I feel like her like ability to persist was almost like her making up to Lucy in a way, because it's like you had to go through this and you almost died for this and you never found out, and like now I didn't believe you, and because of that I'm in this situation, so I'm gonna get through it and I'm gonna find out.
Sure. Oh, I think
that's a
that
really
makes a
good
ton
point,
of sense.
especially because there's that like conversation that takes place in her head where she's like revisiting a conversation about Lucy asking like, do you ever get scared? I think it's Lucy asking Anna like, do you ever get scared? So, and like that feels poignant in that moment to bring that up. So like that's a really interesting point that I didn't think about until you just said that, so thank you.
But I'm so happy that you had us watch this for this podcast, because I really forever would have just thought this was a French rape revenge movie, and that I have no interest in doing that. And this movie truly flayed all expectations. I really like this a lot. And I will say I do like extreme French horror, and I'll talk about that during suggestions. But I do have like huge gaps in it because of that exact thing. I have just no interest in, even if it's a well-made narrative with incredible performance that handles the context like really like respectfully. That's just not something I like can enjoy to the level that I truly enjoyed this movie. And I was so thankful, and I'll repeat it again, that the script had that line like, there was no sign of rape. Like I just like it really allowed me to enjoy the movie.
Great. Well, anyone have any other likes and gripes they would like to say before we move to our next section? No, we're all good. Flayed out. Okay, great. So let's move on to our next section. Brains. Tasty. So we have the luxury now of Jamie and Sydney, who are both mental health professionals.
Woo! Double the explanation.
Whoa!
It's like having Jung and Freud on the podcast at the same time.
I'm weak. That's fantastic. Okay, so with that comes a shit ton of questions from Brian and myself. But my first question to both of you are, what do you think is the best way to process being abused, specifically physical abuse, so that you're not holding on to anger towards your abuser, and so that you can move forward in a more healthy way?
Shall we all say it together on 3?
Yep.
1, 2, 3.
Therapy!
Yay!
It's so okay, and so here's another question to piggyback off of that. For people who, I mean, therapy is not free.
Sure.
So for
Valid.
people who might not have access to therapy, there's two questions. Is there a way to kind of get therapeutical treatment? I made up that word. Or if you are an abused victim, like, will the court, the judge, like, pay for your therapy, like, through that? Like, yeah.
I actually work in prison with the people who do abuse and murder people. So something, which is my like legit answer that I was going to say, because I'm a huge fan of restorative justice, which is actually doing like, you know, sit downs between the offender and the victim. And obviously like both parties need to be willing to do this and consent to it. And like, I know for us, like we have a victim services unit that kind of will coordinate with the victim specifically and do that for free. So
that's
obviously
amazing.
this movie is a little different, but
right,
in real
for
life,
sure, for sure.
yeah.
Yes, Jamie.
To that point, I was in the victim services unit at one point in my career. So I was the counselor who would meet on the other side with like victims and survivors of crimes, and we would meet, like, it was through the DA's office, and so it's a free service to anybody who is involved in some kind of crime. So that's who I would meet with. And then the unit was also comprised of like other social service workers who would help with like other elements. So depending on what the crime is, you might require like some financial, like not necessarily restitution, but just like you might have financial needs. You might have like if there's a death, funeral expenses, things like that. There are resources and grants that that like this office would help people apply for in order to get funding for some of these things. It's already, you know, traumatic enough to have had gone through it, so like to be able to then access these resources as well. Also like people who would help like for folks who are undocumented or like not from the US would also help with like applications for visas. There's special visas for like for these circumstances as well. So like there's so many different resources that are available. That being said, also understanding that like not everybody wants to go the legal route, which is totally valid, and then poses like, well, like what you said, like other barriers potentially to accessing like services because you know it can be super expensive. But there are like some people who do offer like low cost or like free services in general. I think it just, the challenge is then like taking the time to actually like find those resources. If you're like already in the world, like when I was like in it, I like had, I had like a whole spreadsheet. You know, I'm a spreadsheet girl.
Yeah.
Like, I had a whole spreadsheet of like all of the resources in New York. Like when I was like fully invested in this system, I like learned a lot, and I was like, let's just document all of this. And like, now I have all of these things that I could send people to, and it's like really helpful. Moving to a new city, I feel way more out of touch because I'm not as familiar with all the resources, and I haven't really been in that world more recently. But like, it definitely, there are people when you find them that like truly know the ins and outs of like anything that you can access, which I think is just like such, that's like gold. It's like such valuable information.
I feel like
it can be really hard.
I feel like because we have two mental health professionals who have experiences on both sides of the coin, we just solved like a Sudoku puzzle that like we couldn't figure out for a long time. Like it feels so complete,
satisfying. Yes,
so satisfying.
Yes,
like I can't even begin to like express like my like completionist like love for this experience.
It was meant to be.
Yeah.
Listen, we have seen the afterlife. We know we have reached it.
We know.
Here we are.
Doubting, bitches.
Doubting. Oh my god. Iconic.
Truly iconic. Okay, my next question is, why do you think a person's first reaction to abuse is revenge or anger?
I mean, I think this movie shows that perfectly, because I think a lot of the times it's just like a defense mechanism for people, and they assume, okay, I was hurt, so if I hurt them back, that's going to take away my hurt and take away my trauma, when in reality, that's probably not going to happen because, and you know, going back to even the I Saw the Devil episode, like he does the same thing and he takes his revenge, and at the end he wins, but he walks away and he doesn't look like he won. He walks away crying and sobbing because it's like he has that realization, like, okay, I did this, but like I still don't have the person I love back. Like I still have this hurt. So what was this all for? So I don't know. I feel like it's just like a primal urge, and it's people's like first reaction, but in reality it doesn't actually solve anything.
Yeah. Jamie, do you have something to add to that? That's great.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's like, you know, sometimes like thinking about how people might feel and like all the complex emotions. I think in general, people talk about like, you know, feeling anger, but like anger can also be like sadness. It can be guilt. It can be like, you know, more like self-deprecating, but like that feels like the more accessible emotion to feel sometimes. And so like I think that also can like explain or fuel why this feels like the best course of action in this situation, because like everything else that might be underlying that is like very painful, really hard to like face, you know, and sit with and like unpack. And it's like I can't sit with my guilt. I need to take action. I need to do something about this. That's what's gonna do it.
Yeah, that's so great, you saying that some emotions are just more accessible than others. I think that's a really good point, because I don't think we really think about why things are in the forefront. It's just like this, I'm leading with this because this is what's like pulling me, as opposed to like saying, even though this is what is pulling me, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to follow that particular emotion. Like, let's dig a little deeper and see like what else is under, like you said, underneath the surface, to really kind of process out like what is happening. I don't know. It's just so interesting. And it makes me think of the movie Inside Out just randomly, because I'm just thinking of anger, just
I
like
did
pressing
not
the
mean
buttons.
for Pixar to
Yeah.
be the subplot
It's really
of
heavily
this episode.
featured. Yeah.
It
Yeah, that
kind
was
of
not
fits,
my
though.
intention. Yeah.
It works.
It does.
Mhm.
Fantastic. My last question was when Mademoiselle was giving the speech about how to make a martyr, and saying that isolating someone and feeding into their isolation and suffering, whether it be physical, mental abuse, can cause their trauma to kind of manifest into things that don't exist, seeing things that don't exist. So my question is like, do you believe that that is true? Like, isolating someone can then turn into them like manifesting things that are not seen by others?
I mean, I think under the right circumstances that can be true. And like, I look at, again, my background, my field, like a huge debate in the criminal justice world is like solitary confinement, because that's been proven to have like really negative effects on somebody's mental state, you know. And if you like combine that isolation with the actual amount of torture and dehumanization that they put Anna through, I absolutely think that's possible.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Flipping the script on my jobs, then after I left the last job, I ended up at an alternative to bail program. So like also familiar
Wow.
with the other side of things. And like
Mhm.
there was a lot, like my program really grew because of like work towards closing down Rikers and like conditions at Rikers Island, and just like, you know, if you're curious at all about that, like there's so much, you can Google anything about it. But like, yeah, I think that solitary confinement like is torture. Like there's just like so much research into the negative impact that it has on mental health. And like, you know, I think even like this isn't the same, but I think about like mass isolation during COVID. Like we don't even still know what the impact that like COVID is having on us, and we won't know that for a while. But I do know that like the isolation was like very harmful for most people's mental health and wellness. So like, again, just another example of like isolation can be used as this awful traumatic tool that absolutely can lead to a whole plethora of mental health issues. So like, that wouldn't surprise me that like, maybe not like 100% of the time, but like, you know, could something happen? I think so.
Yeah. No, that's great. Brian, you had a couple questions.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about Anna kind of grieving for her friend while feeling guilt that she didn't believe her. How can one process that? And I know this movie is obviously an extreme. But like even on even on a smaller scale, like, you know, as someone who truly has shown their loyalty, Anna still had some, you know, doubts. And so I'm wondering, like, how can someone, whether the outcome is extreme or the outcome is a little bit more minor, like how can someone kind of work through that that feeling of whether it's betrayal or grief or anything that's like tied into that belief disbelief?
Therapy.
Yeah.
No, it's tough.
Yeah.
I mean, Anna didn't even have a moment to process it, so
Yeah.
obviously
That's true.
that
Yeah.
was a lost cause.
Yeah. But like that's so right, and it makes me wonder, like, you know, we get some context of their dynamic, and like Lucy makes a comment to Anna about like, oh, you're just like all the other like doctors and people who just said that I'm crazy and things like that. So it's like I'm curious about what they, but like their specific conversations between one another have looked like, because I feel like communication is a big, like they're the way that they are communicating with one another feels like a big piece of what you're asking. And it's like, how does Anna communicate her support of Lucy? Like thoughts on like conditional versus unconditional love are also coming to mind, and like that dynamic within their friendship. But yeah, I mean, like it's hard when you love somebody and you like are compassionate and empathetic towards what they're going through, but also maybe like don't fully buy into something that they're experiencing and like are questioning it. I think that's like a really difficult place to be in between, because like you care so deeply for somebody, even if you have yourself not experienced what they are experiencing. So it's like, I think that there's a way to potentially be like I have not gone through what you have gone through. Like that is such a horrifying, like uniquely horrifying experience that you endured. So it's hard for me to like put myself in your position and like pass any kind of judgment for what you, like how whatever is coming up for you. But like know that I love you, and I have so much empathy for you, and I want to support you the best I can. Like that kind of feels like the best way to navigate that conversation, even if it's not totally satisfying.
Yeah. I like that. That's great. Okay. Brian, did you have any other questions? Is that it?
I have one for you, Nikisha.
Oh God.
Ooh.
These
How
are
would you play a flayed actress?
well, yeah. That's my question.
Oh,
My
good.
question is like, how this movie is wildly to an extreme, and like,
Yes.
I don't know what you subscribe to in terms of like acting style, or what you pick from different pieces. I don't know if you're like all Meisner or all Uta Hagen or all whatever, but like when it comes down to it, like, is this a scenario where like, oh, hangnails hurt me, like that times a million? Like how do you get into that like that place, not only for the second half of this movie if you're playing Anna, but even for the first half of this movie if you're playing Lucy? Like, how do you get to a place where you're not driving yourself insane as an actress because you're really digging into these things, but you're also, the camera picks up everything? How can you make it real at the same time? Like, outside of like the makeup and all of that stuff, like I know you can't go through like everything, but like if you give us a little glimpse, that would be if you can give us a little peek underneath the skin, I think that would be great.
Oh my God.
Well, first off, thank you for the fact of you even thinking that I could possibly process like playing a character like that. So I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
you know all about orphanages. That's what I figure, you know.
I hate it. Only for 4 more weeks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Check her out in Atlanta.
Right. But no, seriously, you know, I will only speak on what I feel like I would do, because I've never had to dive that deep. And in my you know, experiences with acting classes and just observing other actors, I don't think that method acting is for me. Especially from my mental health state, I have to have a distinct separation between who I'm playing and who I am in real life, because who I am in real life is already like batshit crazy in my own mind. So like having to take on a role like that and experience that, even though it was funny, I liked your example of like, oh, I got a cut on my hand times a million, you know, like Stanislavski, like what are you bringing from your past that can equate in a sense of what the intent and the emotion is without really having to feel like you need to be an abused person in order to play this character, if that makes sense.
Yeah,
So
totally.
yeah, I think for me it's just a matter of like, what am I bringing that equates to just this particular emotion that they're wanting to have, not necessarily the actual action that is happening to me. So like if I need to bring up anger, where is that coming from within Nikisha's anger?
Sure.
Like sadness, where is that coming from my own sadness, as opposed to like I am Anna, like somebody go like torture me, which some actors will do, you know, have people do stuff to them so they can feel that emotion and then portray that on camera. Like, but that's not my vibe. So I'll go nails, but times 1,000 for 200, please.
So I actually think that this director is very difficult to work for, from what I've heard. And the woman who played Anna, I won't pretend like I know how to pronounce her name, but she actually specifically said she would never work with him again.
Oh,
They didn't say anything specific, but he did another film which is great, Incident in a Ghostland. And one
that's
of
him?
the actresses, yep.
That makes so
Makes
much
a lot of
sense.
Yep. And one of the actresses in that movie got like permanently scarred on set, like her face, because I guess his conditions, like he really just he really tortures you basically.
wow.
Like
It's
he
like that
doesn't
haunted house.
make easy conditions to work under.
Damn.
Which like
That-
is obviously awful, but like also makes for authentic
Yeah.
acting.
What a bummer. Like,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that brings up a lot of other questions, but what a bummer. But like, that also doesn't surprise me. Like, it doesn't.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
Right.
Totally.
But that's very disappointing because you still need to be taking care of like human beings. Do you know what I mean? Like,
Sure.
safety should be
right, should be
like,
top
I get,
priority.
Like in the 70s, they were like smacking people and like abusing people on set, but like these are modern times, people.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like take a second.
Damn,
get your life.
Daniel.
Yeah.
Not damn Daniel.
Back at it again.
Okay, well, shall we rotten tomatin this?
Yes.
Yes.
I'm very excited to
Tomatin
hear
away.
the score.
It's the Rotten Tomatoes game.
Okay, what do we think this has on Rotten Tomatoes? Now, as a reminder, we are guessing the critic score, but I will let you know what the audience score actually ends up being. Sydney, you can choose whether you want to go first or last or second.
I'll go first. Why not? I feel like foreign horror usually does pretty well on Rotten Tomatoes. So I want to say this has like a 90%.
All right. Jamie.
I was gonna say, oh god, 78. No, I'm
All right.
doubting myself.
And
I was going to say
Nikisha?
77, Jamie.
Oh,
my
damn. This movie has a 65% on Rotten Tomatoes.
No.
Wow.
Yeah. It's still
so rude.
Blasphemous.
it's still considered fresh. That's on 40 reviews. But the audience score is around the same at 69%.
Ugh.
Nice.
America, we're prudes. I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yes.
69. I don't
Yeah,
know
if you're
about
boring,
that.
just say that.
Yeah, if you're boring, just say it. The critics' consensus is a real polarizing movie. This Gallic torture porn is graphic, brutal, nasty, and gruesome, and not to everyone's taste. I agree with that, except for the torture porn. I actually don't think this
Totally
is torture
not.
porn. No,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think it's
So, yeah.
narratively justified.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. All right, now let's do the letterbox score, which I always find fascinating because this is just like your everyday people rating this movie. This has as a reminder, letterbox scores are 0.0 through 5.0. You can do decimal points in this, so one from 0 to 5. Jamie, why don't you start us off with the letterbox guess?
Okay, so I'm hoping that there's also more of an international audience on Letterboxd. So
Mhm.
I'm going with a 3.6.
All right, Nikisha.
Mm. I'm gonna do 2.8.
Interesting. Sydney.
I'm shooting high again. I'm saying 4.5.
Wow. It has a 3.7.
Wow.
So Jamie
Dang.
nailed that one.
There you go.
Yeah.
Gotta get into the people's heads, you know,
Hmm.
under their
So-
skin.
These are the 3 most liked reviews of Martyrs on Letterboxd. At number 3, something to lighten the mood.
Ha! Yes.
Hilarious.
The second most popular one. It's like that SpongeBob episode in which Squidward drops a sofa on his foot and it is excruciatingly pulls his toenail off, except it's 99 minutes long.
That's a
That's, like,
great comment.
Oh my
so
God.
specific, but like accurate.
Yeah.
That is such a great comment.
And then the most
Hysterical.
liked one is it's so good, but I would never ever recommend people watch it. Stay away from this movie at all costs. But they still gave it a 3.5, 4.5, 4.5 out of 5. So
Dang.
yeah.
Okay.
that was Elvis the Alien. Cool.
Thanks, Elvis.
Yeah. So let's get into the 4 S's.
Yes.
Skull, scare, shakes, and suggestions. The Talking Horrors 4 S's.
The 4 S's, for those of you who don't know, are skulls, scares, shakes, and suggestions. Skulls, scares, and shakes, we rate 1 through 10, 10 being the most, 1 being the least. Skulls is how well this movie handles mental health and human behavior. Scares is how scary was this movie. And shakes is how much will this movie stay with you? Can you shake it off? Is this a one and done? That type of a thing. And then we'll go into suggestions next. But Jamie, do you want to start us off with your skulls, scares, and shakes?
Yeah. So for Skulls, I'm giving this a 7. Again, I thought that it was a pretty like good representation of trauma, survivor's guilt, of like, you know, the having doubt about your friend, just like a lot of very reasonable, realistic like decision making and you know, thinking that I feel like was represented in this.
Mm-hmm.
For scares, I gave this an 8. Because it's all in all, it's pretty horrifying. Even it doesn't have to be jump scary to be deeply scary and disturbing.
For sure.
Which I think this is very disturbing. So yeah, big up points for just seeing someone's full on muscly body. And then
She was jacked, though. Am I right?
Those abs.
Mhm.
Oh my God. And then for shakes, I also gave this an 8. I think, I mean, recency bias and all, but like I've really been thinking a lot about this movie and what I think it means, and it's just like really just planted a seed in my brain that I don't think I'm going to shake for a while. And I think I will actually recommend this movie to people because
Yeah.
it's wild, but it's very engaging. It's a real good time. And I'm really grateful that you made us watch this.
Yeah.
I'm so happy to hear
Agreed.
that. I love when people love this movie and aren't like fully traumatized by it. That's great.
Yeah, this is art. I would argue
Yeah.
to anybody this is actual art.
Totally agree.
With a little bit of trauma.
Yeah,
Slight.
but art
Minor.
is art not
Art can
trauma.
Trauma.
A little bit of trauma.
Nikisha, do you want to go?
Yeah, sure. Mine is similar. Skulls, I gave it a 7. Scares, it's an 8 for me. Again, because it doesn't have to be jump scares. Like there are body parts that are just out, and it's crazy. And then also just the shotgun of it all. That was in anytime kids are involved in murder stuff, I'm like high on the list of
Sure.
scares. And then shakes, I gave it an 8 as well. Like I will remember this. Images will be in my brain forever, but I think it was very well crafted.
Great. I actually have the same as both of you, 788. That's
Great.
like dead on for the same exact reasons.
Wow.
I will definitely be suggesting this movie with like the proper expectations. Yeah, I just really dug everything about this movie. And even with my gripe of like the explanation, like that doesn't matter to me. I can enjoy the hell out of this movie, even if it doesn't all click, but I would say 90%, 95% of this movie clicks for me.
Mhm.
Sydney?
Skulls remind me what this one is, how it addresses
Mental health and human behavior, yeah.
So I give this one an 8. I think again, just that whole manifestation of her grief and her trauma and the revenge, not being able to get rid of that was beautifully done.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Scares, I would say 7. I think this movie, again, like the whole concept of it is terrifying. Like definitely no
Yeah.
jump scares, but it gets you more on like a psychological level. And Shakes, how much does this stay with you? I got to give this one a 10. I do.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
like I said, I watched this when I was like 16. And one of the big things that I love about this movie is like, because the flaying scene, that's like the scene, like the point. You don't see any of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you don't see her getting flayed, and that's always something that stuck out to me, because I swear to God, the first time I watched this movie, I was like, I must have been watching a different version. Like I watched this girl get flayed, I know I did, but like your mind just fills in the blanks. It's kind of like the Texas Chainsaw meat hook. Like you never see that meat hook go in.
Yeah.
Yep. Mhm.
And it just like stays with you to the point where you're like making up things that don't even exist. So
Yeah, what's that? That's the Mandela theory. Is that what it's called?
oh, the Mandela effect. Yes.
Yeah, effect with like Bernstein bears, Berenstein
Oh,
bears,
yes,
or whatever
absolutely.
It is.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because also there's another one that's like that. It's like, isn't the first Saw like not bloody at all, but like we assume that it is? Like I think that's another one.
Yeah. I
And
think
even
so.
like Jaws, like you only see the shark for what, like 2 minutes?
Yeah.
If that. Totally.
If that, yeah.
Man.
Which I think those movies like kind of off topic, but I think that's like way more effective.
Yeah.
Like, the ones where your
100%.
mind like fills that in for you.
Yeah.
So
Couldn't agree more.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Who wants to start with their suggestions?
I'll start.
Yeah.
I just have another foreign horror movie that I love, that I don't know how I stumbled upon it, but I was like, this is so great, and the cinematography is great. It's just The Call. It's a Korean psychological horror
I loved
film.
that movie.
It was just so good to my soul and spirit, but it's also 2 women protagonists. And I just think how it's shot is beautiful, but it's intense and gut-wrenching, and the story is I love it. So The Call.
Great. Jamie?
That one was pleasantly surprising.
Yeah.
I have to add it to our list.
Yes.
I have several. So we referenced it many times, but I do think that people should watch I Saw the Devil. If you just want high intensity again, really violent, but like another movie that's like, for me, a one and done. Another movie that like also really disturbed me, but I think is worse in terms of what happens to the people, surprisingly, the Poughkeepsie tapes. It just made, I don't know why, but like that's where my brain went. I don't think there's really that much connection other than like murdering a lot of people. That's it. In terms of an actual like French horror movie that I have seen, I guess it's technically a French-Belgian co-production, but I'm still counting it under French horror. More body horror, but Titan.
I knew it. I knew you were going to say it.
I cannot mention that movie. That movie's
Yes.
wild. Oh my
It's
God.
so
I'll
wild.
never forget that movie.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a memorable psychological body horror, body horror.
Body horror.
That's the emphasis.
Yeah,
Oh.
and also a movie where like you truly don't know what's going to happen in the next scene at any point in this movie.
No, not at all.
Not at all.
Not whatsoever.
Yeah.
And then last,
With
the
the-
one that I wrote down while I
Is
was
that the one with the
talking through-
Macarena?
What?
When they teach them how to do CPR with the Macarena? I'm almost positive that's that movie.
It might be. I only remember like specific scenes that I don't want to spoil for folks.
Sure. Yeah, fair.
Yeah, that's not one of the ones that's coming
that
to
stuck
mind.
with me. Yes.
Anyway, yeah.
Wait, but now I'm wondering, is the Macarena at the right BPM for doing CPR?
I think it's that movie.
Dun, dun,
Anyway,
dun,
I'll look it
dun,
up.
dun, dun.
I know me trying to figure it
Oh
out.
yeah, okay. Because I know "Staying Alive" is supposed to be like the go-to one, and it's kind of the same BPM.
Yeah. Yes, it is. I looked it up. The Macarena is used for CPR in that movie, unlike The Office, where they
Which
do
is Staying Alive. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Uh-huh.
Great. Good to know that there are other
Thank
options.
God that we figured that one out.
Oh my God. The last movie that I wrote down while we were talking about the psychological, like long-term psychological trauma and how it impacts children into adulthood, Smile.
Aye. That's good.
Sure.
Excited to smile again for Smile 2.
Yeah, same.
Yes.
Double smile.
It's called Double Smile. Yeah, I totally forgot.
That's all I got.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot of French stuff. You could watch High Tension or Raw or something to that effect. I also, here's another one. Like, I just wanted to do because we do have Sydney today, I just wanted to say, like, watch Dr. Sleep. Tension
Flan
from,
stand forever.
you have older people trying to like steal something from the youth after being tortured. You have like somebody growing up with trauma and never fully getting over it until they have to become a servant for somebody else with the same trauma. I think there's a lot of similar themes told in a completely different way. So I'll go with those three.
Yeah, that's a good point. For me, because I was thinking more like, the French extremism horror movie. So I also said High Tension because I think that one also is about mental health, but it is not nearly as effective and actually probably is like pretty insulting to people with a certain mental condition. But that's besides the point. But I mean, similar in terms of like there's a twist and it addresses like mental health and very bloody. This one does have sexual abuse. So that's what makes it like the French extremism territory. And then another one I said for French horror films is Inside. Yeah, Inside is a traumatizing one. I think even more so than Martyrs.
Sure.
But I think this one also just like captures the desperation of the main character. Like the same desperation that that Anna is experiencing, the main character in Inside is experiencing. And like the endings of French horror films are like never satisfying. Like nobody really wins. So it's kind of similar with that. And then I also just said Incident in a Ghostland because it is the same director. And that's also a really good movie with a great twist, I believe. That also shows a lot about like defense mechanisms and trauma and it's interesting.
Amazing. Well, I think that wraps up our episode of Martyrs. Thanks again to Sydney for being with us, introducing us to this movie, or introducing me. I know that y'all had seen it, heard of it before, but this is my first encounter. So it's very exciting times to add this to the Rolodex of traumatizing horror movies.
Yeah, what
Glad
fucked
you
up
guys
movie you're
liked this
watching
one,
next
though.
time you're on?
Maybe we'll do Inside.
Oh boy.
Oh,
Has anybody
boy.
seen Inside?
No,
No.
but I know. I
Yeah.
know.
You know about it.
Well, actually, this is a totally different conversation we can have, and I know that I did this to myself. But a lot of horror movies that I've never seen were ruined by the absolutely fantastic, like, scariest scenes thing that
Oh,
Shudder
yeah.
did. Like, it was wonderful. Like, I watched it the hell out of it and I enjoyed it, and I purposefully hit play knowing that. But like,
Yes.
some movies that I'd never seen were unfortunately spoiled through that. But like, that will not detract from my enjoyment of those.
Mm.
But I would
Yeah. Oh,
for
totally
sure.
do Inside with You. No
Oh
question.
God, if you think anything was spoiled, trust me, there's like 300 other things that will just slap you in the face with that one.
Great.
So,
I'm ready.
disclaimer
I'm ready.
to anybody listening: do not watch that movie if you're pregnant. That's all I will say.
Great.
Oh my God.
Lovely.
Yes. Well, I'm excited for the day when we get to talk about that.
Yeah.
Great. Well, thank you guys for listening to us. You can follow us on all social medias, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, at Talk Horror Pod, POD. And producer Brian, where can they listen to us?
You can find us wherever you get podcasts. You can find us on YouTube. Hi, YouTube. They have like new podcast playlists and stuff like that. So check us out there. You can find us on Spotify, of course. You can find us on things like Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us there. 5 stars, please. And while you're at it, you could also find the Hello Sydney podcast on those same exact places. And let's do another one. Let's give that podcast 5 stars, please.
And thank you.
Yeah, Sydney, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks
Yes.
for having me. I will come on and traumatize you guys anytime. Happy to be here.
That is truly the greatest compliment.
It is.
Traumatize me. Yay.
Hearts all around. Yay. Woo. Brian, is there anything you want to end with? End us with?
Not really, I guess. I don't know. Like,
So, yeah.
yeah, I mean,
Keep doubting. Keep doubting, baby.
keep doubting, baby.
Oh, yeah. That's
Doubting.
it.
The most iconic 2 lines maybe ever. I don't know.
That was, oh, man,
It was pretty iconic.
Yeah.
Those words haunt me in my sleep. So
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yes.
But no, I'll end on. Don't forget, I put the Hello Sydney podcast in the description, so everyone check that out.
Yay.
All right, guys. Thanks for listening. Bye.
Bye. Don't get flayed.
bye.